It is March 25th, 1911. 4:40 in the afternoon. The 9th floor of the Triangle Waist Company in Lower Manhattan. Young women are gathering their belongings, ready to head home after another long week making shirtwaists. The popular Gibson girl blouses that define women's fashion. Someone drops a match, or a cigarette. Nobody will ever know for certain. What happens next will kill 146 people in just 18 minutes. And it will change American labor law forever. This is a story that deserves to be told carefully. To understand what happened that Saturday, you have to understand what the Triangle Waist Company represented in 1911. This was the heart of New York's garment district, the epicenter of American fashion. Maximum Blank and Isaac Harris had built a $1 million empire manufacturing the shirtwaist blouse that every modern woman wanted to wear. They called themselves the Shirtwaist Kings, and in many ways, they had earned the title. The Triangle factory occupied 3 floors of what was then considered a modern, fireproof building. The 8th, 9th, and 10th floors of the Asch Building at Washington Place and Green Street in Greenwich Village. 500 workers, mostly young Italian and Jewish immigrant women, aged 14 to 23. They earned $6 to $10 per week, which was decent money for the time, if you could get it. These women supported entire families on those wages. They sent money back to relatives in the old country. They saved every penny they could. There is a growing community of people who believe these stories deserve to be told. If you are one of them, subscribe and join us. The work was hard but steady. 6 days a week, sometimes more during busy seasons. The factory ran with precision that would impress any modern manufacturer. Rows of Singer sewing machines, mountains of cotton fabric, tissue paper patterns hanging from the ceiling, oil-soaked rags in bins throughout the floor. Everything needed to turn raw materials into the most fashionable garments in America. Blank and Harris knew their business. They had survived previous fires at other locations, small blazes that had taught them to move quickly when things went wrong. What they had not learned was prevention. The Triangle factory had experienced at least 7 small fires in the previous decade. Just 2 months before that fatal Saturday, workers discovered smoldering rags in a bin, a small blaze that was quickly extinguished. And that, right there, is what should have been the warning. But no significant safety improvements were made. Business continued as usual. The profits were too good to interrupt. In 1909, 2 years before the fire, something remarkable happened. 20,000 garment workers, mostly young women, walked off their jobs across New York City. They called it the Uprising of the 20,000. It was one of the largest labor strikes in American history at that time. These women were demanding better working conditions, shorter hours, and critically, safety improvements. Triangle workers were right in the middle of it. They knew their workplace was dangerous. They had seen those small fires. They knew about the locked exit doors. Yes, locked exit doors. Blank and Harris kept the exit doors locked from the outside during work hours. Their reasoning was simple. They wanted to prevent theft. They wanted to prevent unauthorized breaks. They wanted complete control over their workforce. The striking workers demanded those doors be unlocked. They demanded proper fire exits. They demanded safety inspections. The Triangle owners refused most of these demands. They maintained their anti-union policies. And here is where the system failed in ways that seem almost impossible to believe today. New York City fire inspectors had never inspected the Triangle factory above the 7th floor. Never. The reason was simple and terrifying. The fire department's ladders could not reach higher than the 7th floor, so they simply did not inspect the upper floors. The building had a single exterior fire escape. It ended at the 2nd floor. It was not designed to handle the building's occupancy of 500 workers. But the building was technically legal under existing codes. Those codes were tragically inadequate. The Asch Building was considered fireproof because it was made of steel and concrete. But fireproof meant the building would not collapse. It did not mean the contents could not burn. And the Triangle factory was filled with some of the most combustible materials you could imagine. Cotton scraps everywhere, tissue paper patterns, oil from the sewing machines, wooden floors soaked with machine oil, a fire trap disguised as a modern workplace. The building had no sprinkler system, no fire hoses connected to water, no adequate ventilation to clear smoke. When investigators later examined the safety preparations, they found almost nothing. The human cost is difficult to comprehend. Saturday, March 25th, 1911, 4:40 in the afternoon. Most of the Triangle workers were preparing to leave. It had been a long week. They were ready to go home to their families. Then someone on the 8th floor noticed smoke coming from a rag bin. The fire started small. A dropped cigarette or match, most likely. But it spread with terrifying speed through the cotton scraps and tissue paper patterns scattered across the floor. Workers on the 8th floor tried to fight the blaze with buckets of water, but the single fire hose was not connected to water. It was useless. The flames jumped from bin to bin, from pattern to pattern. Within minutes, the entire 8th floor was engulfed. The workers who could escape headed for the stairways. Those on the 8th floor mostly made it out. But on the 9th floor, something much worse was happening. When workers rushed to the main exit door, they found it locked from the outside. Locked. Just as it had been every day for years. But this time, being locked in meant being trapped in a fire. The workers pushed against the door. They screamed for help, but the door would not open. Some tried the freight elevators. The operators, showing incredible courage, made multiple trips up to rescue workers. But the elevator shafts quickly filled with smoke. The elevators stopped working. Others rushed to the single fire escape, but it was never designed for hundreds of panicked people. Under the weight of fleeing workers, the fire escape collapsed. It crashed to the courtyard below, taking several workers with it. The single stairway became clogged with smoke and panicked workers. Many could not see through the thick black smoke. They stumbled and fell. Others behind them fell on top of them. Had you ever heard of this before today? The fire department received the alarm at 4:45. They arrived within minutes, but their ladders reached only to the 6th floor. They could not reach the workers trapped on the 9th and 10th floors. They set up safety nets on the sidewalk below. But when workers jumped from the 9th floor windows, the force of their fall tore right through the nets. Fire Chief Edward Croker later described watching helplessly as workers made impossible choices in those final moments. The fire burned for just 18 minutes. When it was over, 146 people were dead. 123 women and 23 men. The victims ranged in age from 14 to 43. Most died from smoke inhalation or burns. Others died from the fall. These are the stories we owe it to the victims to remember. On April 5th, 1911, 11 days after the fire, New York City witnessed something extraordinary. 400,000 people marched in a funeral procession through Manhattan for the unidentified victims of the Triangle Fire. An estimated 1 million people lined the streets. It was one of the largest public demonstrations in New York City history. The grief was overwhelming. But grief was not enough. The public demanded justice. Maximum Blanc and Isaac Harris were charged with first- and second-degree manslaughter. The trial began in December 1911. For 3 weeks, prosecutors presented evidence that the owners knew the exit doors were locked, that they had maintained these deadly policies for years. Survivors testified about the locked doors, about the inadequate fire safety, about the warnings that had been ignored. But the defense had a different strategy. They argued that Blanc and Harris did not know the doors were locked during the fire, that they could not be held responsible for the actions of their floor supervisors. Despite substantial evidence to the contrary, the jury believed them. On December 27, 1911, both men were acquitted. The verdict outraged labor activists and the public. It highlighted how difficult it was to hold employers accountable for workplace deaths, even when those deaths resulted from policies they had implemented and maintained for years. But something else was happening that would prove more important than the criminal trial. 3 days after the funeral procession, a memorial meeting was held at the Metropolitan Opera House. Labor organizer Rose Schneiderman took the stage. She was just 29 years old, a capmaker who had become one of the most powerful voices in the American labor movement. What she said that night would echo through American history. She spoke about the Triangle workers, about their hopes and dreams, about the dignity they deserved. And then she delivered the words that would become a rallying cry for workers everywhere. "The woman worker needs bread," she said. "But she needs roses too. Bread for survival, but roses for beauty, dignity, and fulfillment." Workers deserved more than just enough money to stay alive. They deserved safe workplaces. They deserved respect. They deserved a chance at happiness. Her words transformed the conversation about workers' rights. This was not just about wages anymore. It was about fundamental human dignity. The Triangle Fire had killed 146 people, but it had also awakened something in America. A recognition that working people deserved protection, that employers had responsibilities to their workers, that government had a role to play in ensuring workplace safety. In the aftermath of the Triangle Fire, New York State did something unprecedented. They created the Factory Investigations Commission. It was chaired by two men who would later become giants in American politics: Robert Wagner Sr., future United States Senator, and Al Smith, future Governor of New York. Both built their careers on the reforms that emerged from this tragedy. For 4 years, the commission investigated workplace conditions across New York State. They visited factories, interviewed workers, examined safety records. Their final report recommended 56 new laws. 36 of those laws were enacted. They revolutionized workplace safety in America. Mandatory fire exits that could not be locked during work hours. Regular safety inspections of all floors of industrial buildings. Requirements for sprinkler systems and fire equipment. Limits on working hours. Better ventilation systems. These reforms saved countless lives. But the Triangle Fire's most important legacy came through one witness. Frances Perkins was 31 years old in 1911. She was a social worker having tea with friends near Washington Square when she heard the fire bells. She ran to the scene and watched in horror as workers jumped from the 9th floor windows. Years later, she said she could never forget the sound of them hitting the sidewalk. That moment changed her life. She became a crusader for labor reform. In 1933, Franklin Roosevelt appointed her Secretary of Labor. She was the first woman ever to serve in a presidential cabinet, and she used that position to transform American labor law, Social Security, federal minimum wage laws, the 40-hour work week, federal unemployment insurance, the foundation of federal workplace safety regulations. Every major labor protection Americans enjoy today can be traced back to reforms championed by Frances Perkins. And Frances Perkins credited the Triangle Fire as the defining moment that shaped her life's work. Prevention is not dramatic, but it saves lives. Today, the Asch Building still stands at Washington Place and Green Street. It has been renamed the Brown Building and is part of New York University. There are small memorial plaques installed in 1991 and 2011. But many people walk past every day without knowing what happened there. The Triangle Shirtwaist Fire killed 146 people in 18 minutes. But it also gave birth to the modern American labor movement. It proved that working people could demand protection from their government, that employers could be forced to prioritize worker safety over profits. That tragedy could be transformed into progress. And this is the pattern I keep seeing in these stories. The most important changes often come from the most preventable disasters. We forget these lessons at our own peril. The Triangle Fire reminds us that workplace safety is not a luxury. It is a fundamental right. One that was paid for with the lives of 146 young workers who just wanted to make it home safely at the end of their shift. This video is presented for educational purposes. We have relied on official reports, news coverage, and public records in telling this story. If this resonates with you, let me know in the comments. And subscribe for more stories that deserve to be remembered.